The fun. Hello, how are you all? Ron Ray here, and joined again for our weekly or regular podcast with Jim Fifth. How are you, Jim?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
Not bad. Sorry for the delay, everyone. We've had some technical issues. Today we are joined with author Ted Flynn, and Ted Flynn is from the Apostolate, Signs and Wonders of Our Times. Ted's been with us before to discuss his most recent book, which is The Great Reset. And today we're going to be discussing one of his other books, which is on Garabandal, and the book's called Garabandal and Its Secrets. Welcome to our channel again, Ted. Great to have you back.
Oh, thank you very much.
I would love to first say I am beyond ecstatic to meet you, because I didn't even. All right, really quickly, your book, The Thunder of Justice, is the reason of my complete conversion, pretty much. It's the reason After the Warning website exists, and a lot of the things that we have done here was solely because of your book. I could never thank you enough. I was flabbergasted last time he interviewed you. I'm sorry, it was so long ago. I actually didn't even know you were still alive. So I was so excited when I heard he said Ted Flynn. I'm like, no, I had to watch it all. But I was just so happy to hear, that you were still. And then I seen your book, and it was revised. I read the original one many years ago. It was a life-changing book. I remember I stayed up 2 nights and days straight. I didn't sleep more than an hour between the 2 days, just reading nonstop. It was like something gave me this extra energy, telling me just to read and absorb it all, and just unbelievable. I'm just so happy to actually meet you.
Well, it's nice to hear those stories because, as you know, being in an apostolate, you get knocked around a lot. So it's really encouraging to hear those kind of stories. And I think it's actually necessary for people like us as well. And I see your program is called After the Warning. I've heard about it. And frankly, it's pretty apropos for tonight's, what we're going to be talking about, because really, for the most part, people aren't going to know what happened. I almost called that booklet, what just happened and what happens next, the one that Ron just mentioned. I called it Garabandal and Its Secrets, just to get the name Garabandal in the title. But by and large, before the warning, most people aren't going to have any idea. But after the warning, they're going to wonder what happened, and is there something else coming? And that's, as we know, is going to be the miracle.
Yeah, we're going to be extremely busy after. so busy.
I think it's going to be an event that virtually changes our entire civilization. And, whether or not I'm exaggerating this or some sort of hyperbole because of my love in it and belief in it, but I think it's going to be almost as significant as the way we date time, BC and Anno Domini, before Christ and after Christ. I think it's going to be that significant to the world of what it's going to mean.
Wow, I didn't think of that. You mean we don't have to use that BCE thing that they reinvented?
They might invent another couple of letters at the end of the day. It might be AW after the warning.
EW.
There you go.
So I've enjoyed the people that I've met. I've spoken in so many venues. I was telling Ron last week, in 1994, I spoke in several of the major cities of Australia, and relationships that I've made all over the world because of our writings has been an absolute joy for my wife and I. It has been such a full life to meet such a diverse group of people that have had maybe very little in common before they've really gotten into the majesty of the Blessed Mother. But then when they grab it and they hold it and they really understand it, lives change. as Louis de Mumford said, she's the magnet that brings people to Christ.
Well,
And Ted, I just want to mention to viewers, Ted's been researching and into this realm of the apparitions and Our Lady's messages for over 35 years. So you're not new to it, and you're probably one of the most experienced researchers out there.
Well, since, we've had our magazine, Signs and Wonders for Our Time, we're going literally into our 35th year. We have probably brought into the Washington, D.C. area somewhere near 170 speakers over the last 35 years, because people grow when they see other people and they hear things, they expand their vision, they grow. But I first heard of Garabandal in my local church in 1984, and have always been captivated by it. And Jim, I guess if you've read The Thunder of Justice, you've recognized that the heart and soul of the book is the two very large chapters on Garabandal, one on the warning and one on the miracle.
oh yes, they were the most pertinent.
Yeah, and I feel on a very personal basis that Garabandal is the only thing in the world as a supernatural event that can correct the direction of the world. That's why I think it's that important, and why I place so much in what's said there, because we're just spiraling completely out of control. And due to the interconnectivity of the world economy and everything that's going on, I mean, pick any genre: church, geopolitics, academia, government, entertainment. It's all, we're just spiraling deeply and fast out of control right now, away from God. And the only thing I think that can reverse this tide of filth is literally going to be the aviso in Spanish, the correction of the conscience, the warning, a life review, or a judgment in miniature. There's some terms for this that seem to be fairly interchangeable with different people, but the general term would be the warning.
And as you're saying, like, different people have different interpretations of the warning. Some call it the great illumination of conscience, and there are a few different controversies and confusions. Would you be able to, can we start off by talking about those?
There's more than a couple. Do you have any ones in particular?
First of all, just the naming of the event. Is it? Some people call it illumination of conscience. Some people call it the warning. Can you just tell me what the difference between those two are?
There really isn't. I mean, it's kind of taking on a language of its own after the last 60 years. Many people, since the book came out, and Jim, and you've read it, since the book came out in literally 1993, I have probably met as many as 20 people that have experienced the warning, which is generally where they see their life, of sins of omission and commission, and they see their life kind of like a slow moving picture, but yet it goes fast in terms of a life, and we see our sins of how they hurt people, of how they hurt God, how they hurt our family, how they hurt friends. So in every single person that has ever experienced this warning, they all tell in essence the same thing. It's the single biggest event in their life that it takes them sometimes 5 years to explain what happened. There's a book, if anybody hasn't heard of it, it's called 7 Lessons I Learned in Heaven. It's a Dr. Mary Neal. There's about 10 pages in her book. If anybody has it, it's chapter 2. It's the 10 pages of the best explanation I've ever heard of anybody who have experienced the warning. And it's just life-changing. I mean, I don't know, you're over there in Australia, and I'm not sure, there was a movie many years ago. The man's name was Dick Bingold, and he had been a cop. He was a very close personal friend of mine for many, many years. He experienced the warning, and he couldn't get up he couldn't get off his kitchen room floor for 5 hours after seeing everything he had done, and was remorseful and repentant and weeping for 5 hours. So that's the impact. And what happened to Dick after kind of being kind of bad boy? I mean, we're not talking, ultra bad boy, but we're talking about a person who had not lived a virtuous life. In his own words, this was his testimony. So there's nothing out of school here. But he's an individual who completely changed his life, and for the last 20 years became a healing minister in South Africa. And every single person tells the same story. It's just the single biggest event in their life that they can't even put words to many times for years. And we've interviewed many of these people. We've done articles on them in our magazine. They've spoken for us at events that my wife and I have sponsored. So, when you see the same thing, and some call it like a life review. So you ask, what's the difference in language? They use kind of different terms. They may not have naturally, they didn't even know what it was. So they use maybe the term life review, but they learn as they go along. And how many are actually going to equate this with a Catholic event? Catholics are going to be more knowledgeable of this, that have known something about the warning. And the warning, by and large, will be more severe to those that have lived sinful lives, if we want to get a little bit into what it is. Where a person that has lived a sinful life will have a much more difficult time with it. But by and large, a person that has had more of a virtuous life and a godly life, it'll make an impact, make no bones about that. But it won't be as tortuous as it is for many people.
Am I correct that Garabandal isn't the only apparition that predicted the warning, like Faustina did, who's approved by the church, if I'm correct, and various others have as well? Because I know a lot of people have problems with Garabandal, but they're not the only one that mentioned the warning. I think they're the only ones who called it the warning or aviso. Others that called it the illumination.
That's right. Father Gobi uses the term illumination of conscience. Now you're into an area of, mixing and matching, which in something I'm doing now, I'm making a very, very big point of that. The warning as given to us at Garabandal has been given to us in a great deal of detail through 4 young visionaries that are now, one's dead, Mary Lowley died in 2009, and they're in their 70s now. So, this took place 60 years ago. It started June 18th, 1961, where the angel came, and it came 8 times over 12 days. And then the Blessed Mother came, on July 2 and made her first appearance then. So it's been a long time. But the number of visionaries, locutionists, saints that have actually spoken about having, quote, a judgment in miniature, an illumination of conscience, is actually fairly substantial. There are people who have experienced it, like Saint Faustina, as incidentally the first saint of the new millennium, in an era of divine mercy, to where she gives tremendous detail. If you'd like me to read it, since you brought it up, because she is
by all means.
She is a canonized saint in the church, so that people will maybe have actually, I don't know if it's one of the pages I printed out. No. Oh yeah, here it is. Here's where Saint Faustina said, and the illumination of conscience, she experienced in a personal basement, quote, a judgment where she was allowed to see her sins as God sees them. She wrote about this saying, "Once I was summoned to the judgment seat of God. I stood alone before the Lord. Jesus appeared such as we know him during his passion. After a moment, his wounds disappeared except for 5, those in his hands, his feet, and his side. Suddenly, I saw the complete condition of my soul as God sees it. I could clearly see all that is displeasing to God. I did not know even then that the smallest transgressions will have to be accounted for. What a moment! Who can describe it? To stand before the thrice holy God. Jesus asked me, "Who are you?" I answered, "I am your servant, Lord." And then it goes on a little bit. But so there it is. I mean, in really just a sentence, she said, I saw the complete condition of my soul as God sees it. That is the warning of what she calls it, more the illumination. Other people that have experienced what could be called NDEs or near-death experiences, a lot of them call it a life review. So it's according to what many people have as a knowledge of their own life and their own spirituality. But how many people does anybody listening, or either the two of you, how many people do you know that you can talk to on a daily basis as you either go to church or your bagel shop or wherever you go, that are actually familiar with what this warning or illumination of conscience is? And I think the answer is going to be very, very, very few. And maybe just your core group of friends that have your own degree of spirituality. It's by and large not going to be really known for what it is. But we've had people speak about it. We've had more modern day mystics like, Maria Esperanza spoke about it. Marie Julie Jahaney spoke about an event, but not necessarily the interior that is spoken about. Faustina, what we see. Janie Garza in American Vision has spoken about it. So there are people, Christina Gallagher of Ireland, who has had the stigmata for years, sometimes invisible, sometimes not. She has spoken about this event. So there are people who have spoken about it, but Garabandal has what I call the 2 acts in one play of the warning and then the great miracle, as sequential with more information. Within 1 year will come a miracle, and we'll see the state of our souls. So, and they each speak in quite a bit of the 4 young visionaries of Garabandal speak in quite a bit of detail what it will be like to experience this more than other people have.
I have another question for you. It may be a little tougher to answer, though. For years, I've always heard not only about the warning, but also coinciding about how this age that we're in is pretty much walking the road of Calvary, with the church, just as Jesus did 2,000 years ago. The church will walk the same path and also be crucified and then be risen. In that light, is the illumination pretty much similar to the rising of Christ, or is the church still going to end up going through its, passion and crucifixion after that?
After what event, specifically the warning?
Actually, I'm just trying to tie them together. I'd like to get your opinion, either the warning or the miracle, or I guess, is the warning at the beginning of the church's passion, or is it like after the warning, the church will suddenly find itself renewed and revigorated, and those who are evil and are bent on evil are going to schism and split apart from it?
I don't really, I think there's a lot of different nuances and concepts that are actually in that question of whether or not you're literally talking about the equivalent of an era of peace or sin, or, what will happen after. But for me, the warning and the miracle, I mean, if we want to look at civilization as an era of time, or even in decades, I mean, the warning and the miracle are actually so closely connected in time that it's going to be the same era. not going to be this great line of demarcation in time, that we know the miracle is within 1 year. Other people, more modern mystics, are talking about the warning and the miracle in a closer space of time. In all of my writings, I go back to the original of what was said, not to interpret what another is saying. Why? Because when the church looks at an apparition, each apparition has to stand completely on its own. They can't go back and say, well, Medjugorje said this, Fatima said this, this is Garabandal, Pont Main, Bonneau, Borang. They have to stand on Guadalupe. They all have to be independently true on what they say. So, in terms of will there be sin or evil, the answer is yes. But there will be a line of demarcation where people, we're told that we will know, the devil knows that we know his game is up, that the illumination will be such a preternatural event, there will be such infused knowledge that by and large, we will know who the devil is in a much more profound way and not have the fear that we do now. So that would be a logical extension of that. So what's happened with Garabandal is what happened with other apparitions. By and large, a message is given. Now, again, this was a little over 60 years ago. And now, what happens many times is people, everybody with an internet connection with insomnia is blogging about, these events. But by and large, you can't really mix and match them. Garabandal is going to have to stay on its own and be firm in what was said there. And here's what I've learned studying apparitions now over almost 40 years, that when something is said, it will happen exactly as it was said, but not as we think. And that's going to be a given here. I mean, these events are so supernatural of what's being predicted. We can't even really wrap our head around this. They're so profound. They're just absolutely huge. And to try to really fully understand them. And that's why we have to really accept on faith what's being said here, and with discernment. But if you take a look at Fatima, what was said in 1917 to the three young visionaries, even younger than Garabandal, things leaked. Information came out. So is there an element of that actually with some of the anecdotal stories where some of it is changed? And the answer to that may be yes. Some of these stories have been changed.
So in regards to the visionaries of Garabandal, can you tell us what they had said in regards to the warning and the miracle?
Well, the warning is, there's a lot more information. There was I met Mary Lowley all the way back in her home around the year 2000 in Haverhill, Mass. And, if you asked a question, there was a little bit of a running joke between Mary Lowley and Conchita. If you asked about the miracle to Mary Lowley, she'd say, go ask Conchita. She knows about the miracle. And if anybody ever asked Conchita about the warning, she'd say, go ask Lowley. So, we know that there's more information and kind of bricks and mortar of material in what was said specifically about what the miracle would look like. But it's much less information. We know that it's going to happen. The warning is going to happen in some year that precedes the miracle. We don't know what that year is. There's been a bit of a parlor game for many, many years, especially as it led up to the year 2000 with the Jubilee, where everybody was kind of saying, well, I think it's this date. And then, everybody's kind of trying to pick the month for the miracle. I think we could go over, if you want, with some of the issues that, or what the miracle, if we could go over, what are the data points for the miracle, if you want.
So, Ted, in regards to the warning, we don't have a specific notice. No, there's not going to be an announcement of any sort by Conchita. before the warning? Because a lot of people have got that confused. Some people think that Conchita is going to be warning the world 8 days or 9 days before the warning happens, and that's not true. Is that right?
Absolutely not. And I've been around a lot of really, really good folks over many, many years that they still, when you're with them over a cup of coffee, they'll ask, what comes first, the warning or the miracle? And it shows that they don't really have an understanding, number one, of what Garabandal's about, or they don't understand the sequence of the event. So the only one who knows who knew the year of the warning is Mary Lowley, and she died. But she was never going to make an announcement. She died of lupus in 2009. And she was never going to make an announcement. It's going to take the world by surprise. It's going to last about somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes. And why I say there's a discrepancy, that if you look at the information's provided, sometimes they'll say 15, and maybe in a more offhanded way, they'll say, 10 minutes or something. So everything gets back to where is your footnote from, and when did they say it, and who said it. So since there's a difference here of understanding, let me go over what some of the things that were specifically said at Garabandal, to where we're not going to interpret them of what maybe was said anecdotally later and what some other visionaries said may be. So let's just stay strictly in our lane of Garabandal, of what was said there, to have the integrity and the scholarship to stay there. So after the warning, there's going to be a great miracle at the 9 Pines of Garabandal. Now, for anybody who has ever been there, they know that there's these 9 pines in the Cantabrian Mountains in northern Spain, about 75 minutes from Santander in the Bay of Biscay. And so it's a natural amphitheater. I was there the first time in 1994, and I was there again in 2017 when my wife and I led a pilgrimage there. And we had 100 people, and everybody could feel the mystical aspect of what was going on at Garabandal for the future. And it's a natural amphitheater. Millions, it's a mountain range. And on all 360 degrees of the 9 Pines are mountains. So millions could be there looking at the 9 Pines for whatever this miracle is going to be. So here's what was given all the way back when these things were information was first divulged. It says it will occur on a Thursday evening at 8:30 p.m. Spanish time. It will be between the 8th and the 16th of a month, March, April, May, or June. Now we'll go over some of the little discrepancies that have evolved over the last couple of years. Conchita, at one point on Irish TV, which it's probably on YouTube, you could Google Conchita of Garabandal on Irish TV. She said literally the miracle was in the March, April, May, or June. Another time she said March, April, or May. And another time she said April, May, or June. So now, then there's a woman by the name of Maria Sirocco, who was a very, very good friend of Garabandal, was around it for a lifetime, knew Mary Lowley well, originally from Massachusetts, then moved to Pasadena, California, very much promoting Garabandal in a global way, would never hurt it. But she said Mary Lowley told her, wait a minute, it wouldn't have been Mary Lowley to say the miracle, so that's even an inconsistency. But Mary Lowley apparently had said to Maria Sirocco that the miracle was in the month of April. So, a lot of people look at different things, and everybody's got an opinion, and everybody's looking at their calendar for when is a Thursday. They, maybe let's say 2023, they look at their calendar 2024. when is a Thursday in the month of April between the 8th and the 16th. So there's only so many days that it can be. And people have been playing that game for quite some time.
Didn't they also say that it was going to be on a day of a martyr?
We're getting there. You're jumping ahead. Right on cue. According to Mary Lowley, the miracle will take place within 1 year after the warning. So now that's what was said there. Now that we know within 1 year is 365 days if we want to look at the basis for that. But now over the last several years, many years now, people are saying it's 6 weeks, it's 3 months, it's 6 months. That isn't what was said there. So people are kind of interpolating their own personal view on that, which in my opinion is wrong. I mean, Garabandal will stand on its own, but it could be, if you want to look at it, within 8 or 9 days to within a year. But the operative word is within 1 year. So, take your pick. Let's face it, if the warning were to take place in January of 1 year, we know it's not going to be a long wait. But if it takes place, June 1st of some year, we know that it's going to go into the next year, March, April, May or June, so it'll be longer.
Sorry, Ted, to interrupt. Some people, like you just mentioned, within 8 or 9 days. So I'm just wondering, it's not commonly said that it's going to be a very short time between the miracle or the warning and the miracle. Has that been said by anyone, that it might be like even a week's time?
There are mystics out there saying it's going to be just a few weeks, to a few months. But I don't pay any attention to it. Is it possibly true? Yes. Is it maybe true? Yes, maybe not. So, but, we know, if it's in March, April, May, or June, you could start getting your passport ready, depending on, and renewing it if you wanted to, to be able to journey there. But we're going to go back, and I think this will solve your issue. That Conchita said 8 days before the miracle. I think this was Jim's question as well as what you asked. 8 days before the miracle, Conchita will announce when it is. And she also said the miracle will coincide with an important event in the church. She didn't say it was a positive event or a negative event. She said an important event in the church. Now, there are many, many people now thinking that we could be looking at a schism coming up in the church in the next few years. And so whether or not, that's openly being talked about, as a lot of people feel the church is very much going in the wrong direction. And one of the prophecies, literally at Garabandal, which was given contemporaneous with Vatican II, 61 to 65, is that it was said at Garabandal that the Mass would be suppressed. Now, the only Mass at the time of Garabandal was the traditional Latin Mass. So has it been suppressed? I would say yes. So it says the miracle will coincide with an important event. Doesn't say positive or negative, but an important event. Could it be the dogma of co-redemptrix mediatrix? Take a pick. Everybody's got their suppositions and everybody's got their speculations, but we're going to find out who's right here pretty shortly. It'll be also on the feast of a young Eucharistic martyr. So, there's a parlor game also with that. There's certain names out there like Saint Hermenegilda, Saint Stanislaus, Saint Tarcisius, who was a very young boy, who lived under Emperor Valerian in the 1st century when this new Christian sect were being murdered left and right in Circus Maximus and other places. And so there were several people who wanted to receive the Eucharist from their local bishop in Rome or local leader in Rome. And they were all afraid to bring it to him. So a young boy named Tarcisius said he would do it. And the bishop said, no, you're too young. And the boy said, that's exactly why they won't suspect me. So they let him go. He had a consecrated host around his neck in their version of a pyx. And some other boys saw it. They saw him guarding it. They wanted it, and they killed him. So, and then there's another name, Saint Pancras. And then there's Blessed Imelda Lambertini, who that's kind of my bet, if we want to get into speculation, because Imelda Lambertini falls absolutely in line with the events that happened at Garabandal. For those that are familiar, that Conchita received a mystical Eucharist from an archangel that just appeared on her tongue. And the angel took it out of a tabernacle at church as consecrated host. And then there was a very young girl by the name of Imelda Lambertini in the 14th century in Italy that wanted to receive First Communion. She was too young, and the bishop forbade her from receiving it. So when she was in church for a class that was receiving the First Communion, a Eucharist mystically appeared on her tongue, flew out of the chalice, and mystically appeared on her tongue, and she consumed it, and she died on the spot. Now, that's also the mystical communion with Conchita that happened with her. And we know the story of Father Louis Andreu, who was the Jesuit priest who saw the miracle. And then
There's photographs of that miracle as well. That's all over the internet.
Absolutely. And so this Imelda Lambertini actually conforms to the story of Garabandal more than others, because when Father Louis Andreu, people know the story, when he was coming down the mountain, he said, "Milagro, milagro, milagro." He had seen the miracle, that he had been given a mystical glimpse of it. And he said, "Today is the happiest day of my life." And he died on the spot. So little Imelda Lambertini, who is the patron saint of first communicants, she actually received a Eucharist and died of mystical joy from receiving it.
Wow. And what day is her feast day? What date is it?
You ready? May 13th.
That is the day I was suspecting. I just didn't want to say it out loud.
How about?
I bet you the miracle's gonna be May 13th. There's a
how
reason.
about them? Here's
why did you think that?
Here's one for you, Ron. We have an expression in the United States that you may not have in Australia.
Oh,
how about them?
So you cut off there.
No, we say, how about them apples? May 13th, little Imelda Lambertini.
Wow.
So
there you go. You've heard it first on Mother and Refuge of the End Times, everyone. May 13th.
No, not whoa. Not predicting.
I'm joking.
No, I know. But my kids have a joke. I'm never wrong. And let's bring the hilarity out of that. I never guess. I just don't go around guessing on these dates. If we stay with the data and really with the Holy Spirit and how the Holy Spirit works, we're going to get there. And we know we're getting a lot closer. But I've got to tell you, of all of these saints that died for the Eucharist, I can't think of anything that mystically meets the two major things that happen at Garabandal that are all of the information you want is all over the net on those two events.
I got another question for you here, because you just brought up a few minutes ago something else about one of the visionaries had said it would be at a time when the mass was suppressed. For the past few years, everyone was assuming it was because, just most of us, our churches were all closed around the world. So we assumed maybe that's what it was meaning. But you just brought up the idea that, at the time of those visionaries, of the visions of Garabandal, it was only the Latin Mass. And now today, we see that being suppressed brutally by the hierarchy itself. Is there any way of knowing which suppression it was referring to?
Well, no, we only know what we have to go on. The what was stated is that the mass would be suppressed. Now, I always thought the word suppression up until recently just made kind of like a little pressure, you know, you're suppressing something. But I went to the dictionary to see what the word suppress meant, and it's got about four different definitions, and one of them, the last one, means all of the way to decimated. Now that's in the dictionary. If you look at the definition of suppressed, all of the way to decimated. But let's go. We need, there's still 3 or 4 more things that we know about the miracle that are still very important. It says all of those in the village and the surrounding mountains will see it. So we talked about the geography of just how expansive that is. Now here's one for you. The sick who are present will all be cured. All be cured. Think of it. You have a dying friend, a dying relative, a dying colleague, somebody who is extraordinarily sick. You have a neighbor who has a 10-year-old girl who has spina bifida. You have somebody with an incurable disease. And those that journey there will all be cured. Now, here's one. Most people don't know this. When Mother Angelica, after she was cured from her having leg braces for several decades, of all of the places in the world that she went to give thanks for her cure, where she could walk without metal leg braces, the place that she went to was Garabandal, Spain.
And was there a reason for that?
Well, she was just smitten with it. She had Joey Lomangino, the blind apostle of Garabandal, on her show, and she told me that it was the most popular show in the history of her network at that time. It was, and she also, now here's another one for anybody who knew Mother Angelica. She told me at my own dining room table that she said she was going to ask Conchita for a day jump to get her film crew to Garabandal. And the only one who could verify if she ever asked her, frankly, would be Conchita. But that would be just like Mother Angelica's holy boldness. She wanted to make sure she would be able to film the miracle for her audience at EWTN.
Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
So wait a minute, there's just a couple more. It was said, now this is the definite article, the, focus on the word the. It was said it will be the greatest miracle ever performed by Jesus for the world. Ponder that. The greatest miracle ever performed by Jesus for the world. Sinners and non-believers will be converted. The incredulous will believe. Now go back to the cure. Can you imagine somebody who is dying? And, you know, we know a lot of people go to Lourdes and stuff, and, you know, we see crutches all over the walls and the ceilings at Lourdes that have been left, where every single person will leave there cured. And then it says Russia will be converted after the miracle. And the extension of that is, and then all will love our hearts. All will love our hearts. Conchita, who knows the date of the great miracle, will announce it to the world 8 days in advance. So there it is, Ron. She's going to announce it 8 days in advance. And Conchita says that the reigning pope will see the miracle from wherever he is. And she said, before the miracle, there'll be many reported apparitions throughout the world. And she said this in December of 1962. And a bishop of Santander will come along who will not believe at first, but will receive a sign and allow priests to go to Garabandal for the miracle. And then the last thing that I have here is, before the miracle, many will stop believing in Garabandal. I've actually wondered if that had to do with the death of Joey Lomangino, but I don't think it is. I think there's going to be something where a lot of people are saying things of when the miracle will take place or when these events will take place, and then it doesn't happen. And what that exactly is, I don't know. But I do know that, you know, Joey was to receive his sight at the great miracle, and yet now Joey's dead. Joey died in June 18th on literally the exact day of the 53rd anniversary of Garabandal. Joey died in 2014. So if he was supposed to receive his sight at the miracle, Joey's dead. Right now, Mary Lowley is dead. But she had no role to announce the warning, so it doesn't have the consequence of Conchita.
Mm. Mm.
So
Conchita's announcing the miracle, just to clarify, not the warning.
Yep.
Is Conchita the only one that will announce ahead of time about the miracle?
As far as yes.
Who else?
As it strictly speaks to Garabandal, yes.
All right, so we have Conchita, we have Mary Lowley, who's passed away. Who else is there? There's a third one.
You got Mary Cruz, and then you got Jacinta. Three of the four married American men. Jacinta was living in San Diego, last I heard, and Mary Lowley was in Haverhill, Mass, and Conchita Keena was in Point Lookout, New York. She originally lived in Brooklyn for many years and then moved to Point Lookout, which is right at the very, very base of Long Island, literally within view of it's the border of Long Island and New York City.
Wow. Okay, but in the end, only Conchita is the last one who's going to have anything left to do with these.
Yeah. They don't have anything. That's why Conchita is really kind of the lead visionary. It's like Marianne. She's the one at Medjugorje who is going to announce something on June 18th. And then, March 18th, which is her birthday. And it has nothing to do with her birthday, but she said you'll know the significance of the day. So she has turned into more or less the lead visionary at Medjugorje, exactly as Conchita has been at Garabandal.
You had also mentioned that at the time of the miracle, people will be converted, scoffers will turn around. So it's indicating to me that even after the warning, it's not going to be enough to change people, or not everyone at least. There's still going to be scoffers, disbelievers, sinners of every kind. Is that how we're to take that?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've likened it to the Jews leaving Egypt. Think of it, if you want to go back to 400 years, you're almost literally at the time John Bradford, became the first governor of the Plymouth Plantation in 1620. I mean, that's a very, very long time when the Pilgrims came to Massachusetts. That's a long time ago. So here are the Jews in captivity and bondage for 400 years. And then all of a sudden they have this person, Moses, the liberator, let my people go. And then all of a sudden, they leave Egypt. They literally see a sea part. They see the Egyptian army consumed in the water on the chase as the most powerful army in the world at that time. And the people are free. And then, quail and manna are literally dropping from the sky, feeding them. Everybody thinks the word manna actually in Hebrew means bread. The word manna in Hebrew means, what is it? Think of it. They're out in the desert. They're wondering if they're going to eat. And then all of a sudden, this food that has all of the necessary amino acids for sustenance is feeding them, and then quail. And then just in a matter of weeks, which I think this gets to your question of how people will grow cold. In a matter of weeks, they're literally building a golden calf, and they're mad at Moses for bringing them out in the desert. So here, what should have been only an 11-day journey took 40 years. So the people started whining and squabbling and disbelieving, and they're making a golden calf. And then Moses made them grind it up and drink it. And as Fulton Sheen used to say, they must have had quite a case of diarrhea after that. And so You have a situation where if a person's heart has been in formation and predisposed to spirituality, they're going to do better after. But for those that have never had the spirituality first, they will probably revert back to building golden calves quite shortly after. And that's why formation is so important, to be preparing for the future. And formation in our faith is that, faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word. As King David said, I have hid the word in my heart that I may not sin against thee. And that's why scripture memory is so important. We've got to have the word in us. And that's where we get our trust and our faith from, by having the faith in us. And so I do think a lot of people will fall away. I think it's going to be tremendous euphoria. I think it's going to be literally a line of demarcation in civilization for this event, because don't forget, it's not just us. It's going to be every single person in the world that experiences this event, at least the warning, and there'll be some who go for the miracle. You're not going to be able, no one is ever going to be able to deny whoever is there. Once I was blind, now I see. And they come back after family saw them for X number of years, ill or crippled or in some form of ill health, and they come back cured. Nobody's going to be able to doubt this, but there will be skeptics. There's going to be people with hard hearts that will revert back to heinous behavior. Why? Because that's human nature.
And that kind of brings us to the third secret of Garabandal, which is the conditional. Is it a conditional chastisement, or must the chastisement take place?
There's a little bit of controversy and ambiguity around that. At one point, it was said that it could, if people change. But let me read of just what was said here, the very first message and the last message, which could maybe bring a little bit of clarity to that. Here is the very first message, so you can be the judge of that, because it said in certain instances that it can be averted, that punishment can be averted, and then in other times, no. In the very, very first message, it was said, it became public on October 18th, 1961. The girls made known the message that said, many sacrifices must be made. Much penance must be done. We must pay many visits to the Blessed Sacrament. But first of all, we must be very good. If we do not do this, punishment awaits us. So again, punishment is there. God punishes his people for disobedience. There are conditions. And it's what I call in the Old Testament the if-then clause. If my people do this, then. So there is reward for, in a spiritual sense, for good behavior. And here's the line. Already the cup is filling. If we do not change, we will be punished. So now let's go to the last message 5 years later. And it says, literally 4 years and 4 months. People talk about 4 years. It's almost 4.5 years from the very first time the angel came to the very last time that the Blessed Mother appeared. It was 4 years and 4 months. Since my message of October 18th, 1961, has not been complied with and has not been made known to the world, I will tell you that this is the last one. Before the chalice was filling, now it is overflowing. Many cardinals, many bishops, and many priests are on the path of perdition, and they take many souls with them. To the Eucharist, there is given less and less importance. We should avoid the wrath of God on us by our good efforts. If you ask pardon with a sincere soul, he will pardon you. It is I, your mother, who through the intercession of Saint Michael wish to say that you amend, that you are already in the last warnings, and that I love you much and do not want your condemnation. Ask us sincerely, and we will give it to you. You should sacrifice more. Think of the passion of Jesus. And then in every single instance where the Blessed Mother appeared, she was wearing the brown scapular. And so the emphasis here is on the importance of the Eucharist and the priesthood. So that's what Garabandal was about. I mean, and about amendment of life. So I don't see where this is such a radical Catholic message for people who would be detractors that say they're into their faith. I mean, all that's being talked about, as always, at all of these, she always points to her son, and she is speaking about living your faith. And so,
that message sounds exactly the same as the message of Our Lady of Akita, which is an approved apparition.
Yeah, Akita, 1973 is arguably, and I can't think of anything even remotely close, that the message of Akita is the single most severe message ever given by heaven to the Holy Roman Catholic and Apostolic Church, to where she literally said, fire will fall from heaven and the living will envy the dead, as an approved apparition. So you talk about how you can kind of come to a conclusion, the third secret of Fatima, as well, the secret as well as the issue of consecration has been very, very controversial. But with people having opinions literally for decades now of what's said and done. But we know that Cardinal Ratzinger, who actually, as head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, knew the third secret of Fatima, and which proved by the Church, and he used the Latin phrase "de novissimus," which he said as cardinal that the message of Akita and the message of Fatima are essentially the same thing. So yeah, it looks like it could be some rugged times ahead, and that's why I think the warning is so important as a grace to the world. It's the ultimate act of mercy. That's what it is. It's an ultimate act of God's mercy to the world to give this grace.
Is there anything we could do to try to be more prepared for the warning and the miracle?
I would say, just live your faith. I'm asked an awful lot in a lot of our writings that are posted on our site that I do. I've been speaking for the last several years about literally just to the rubrics of the faith. And I've used a lot of examples of that, there's only so many things we can do. But, the Blessed Mother has said in several apparition sites, the refuge is my Immaculate Heart. And, what's the message? She's asking for the rosary, for consecration. She's asking literally for adoration. She's asking for prayer. She's asking for confession. She's asking for family prayer time. Again, this gets back to, I'm trying to find out what could be considered the radical message in these messages where people have such difficulty with them. I mean, I've been around it so long. I go around scratching my head still of why people feel they have to have some sort of venom or some sort of skepticism. I think caution is always a very healthy word around any of this stuff, but the word in being discerning. But on the other hand, skepticism by its very definition implies negativity. So should we be skeptical? I don't think so. Should we be cautious and discerning? Yes. Because let's face it, there's false stuff out there. And I just don't think Garabandal is one of them. I mean, if we look at all of the things that are wrong in the world, I can't think of anything else that could reverse this negative spiral that we're in every genre and milieu of our culture.
And you called it in our last episode, you called it God's Great Reset, which I thought was very cool. Cool way of putting it.
Yep. Well, that's the book that I did. I'm calling it, it's Heaven's Reset. It's the globalist plan versus heaven's plan. It's the army right now of God versus Satan. It's literally good versus evil. It's Cain versus Abel. One killing another for something that the other wanted. So human nature just change. And this is going to be heaven's reset.
Wow.
I have one more question. Sorry to interrupt you, Jimmy. I'll give you the floor in a second. I just wanted to ask one more question about Garabandal. I'm sure you've heard of the wailing nights or the shrieking nights where the girls saw some really terrifying apparitions and they started yelling and screaming. Do you know much about that, and are they related to the final chastisement?
Could be the term that's used at Garabandal from the beginning, is called the Night of Screams. And
yep.
Now, mind you, let's put this in a cultural basis. These are 11 and 12-year-old girls. Conchita was the oldest at 12. And, Garabandal was literally such a simple village with 80 homes and only 300 people. And when in 1969, there literally wasn't a motor with moving parts in the village. And even they harvested their hay with scythes, and it was very, very simple. So, when the Blessed Mother spoke about communism, they had no idea what that meant. When Conchita was told about abortion and asked what it was, she said it's where a mother kills her child. She had no idea how that could even happen. So, but we know that for 3 hours, young girls that have seen very, very little about the harsh realities of life, as many 11 and 12-year-olds do not see anyway, but yet the Blessed Mother let Francesco go to hell at Fatima. So she didn't think that was going to be too rugged for him, because from then on, he wouldn't go a day without saying the rosary or an adoration. So these things make an impression on people. But it appears as if what was shown there, there's not detail on what was specifically, but it was like blood-curdling screams that happened. And it went on for as long as 3 hours, and it was very, very frightful for very, very young children to see what they had seen in visions or had been told by the Blessed Mother. As I say, it's called the Night of Screams. It was a very difficult night for the kids.
So we're not sure exactly what they saw. Yeah.
Did you hear us?
Yeah. No. That's what I say. What they exactly saw, was it the chastisement? I don't know. There's not, again, there's not as much information on the warning other than it'll happen. We have maybe as many as 15 data points specifically on the miracle, but there aren't the data points on exactly what they saw, although it was very, very difficult, with literally like fire was coming down and they were being consumed in fire, And let's face it, that'd be for anybody to see, never mind a little child who had probably even spent very little time out of his own village.
They had no access to TVs or cinemas either in that village.
Oh, no. I mean, in 1961 in northern Spain, in a village that primitive, even in the United States and anywhere in the Western world, TV, wasn't even more ubiquitous until the very late 1950s. And for that matter, it was the early 60s. And there wouldn't have even been any programming over in Spain either. There wasn't the satellite connections at that time. In America, we only had 3 networks, ABC, NBC, and CBS, and they had very limited programming in the early 60s. So, they wouldn't have had access to that kind of technology. When I was there, it had been raining in October, and they were, and it's a mountain. This is you're up there. And all of the water was coming down from the mountain through the middle of the street, and they wore these big wooden shoes with 3 pegs two in the back and one in the front, where you would put your foot in that, so you wouldn't just get your feet wet everywhere you went. So you put your shoe with your foot in it into a big wooden shoe with like pegs, to where the water would just go underneath your feet.
I couldn't imagine people walking around in these wooden clogs.
Well, remember, that was very common in World War II, even, where the Dutch wore wooden shoes. It's kind of a symbol of the Dutch, where, remember, they're wooden shoes because they're below sea level. It's only one of two countries in the world below sea level, and they all wore wooden shoes because their feet were getting wet every day.
I never knew that was the reason.
Yep.
Well,
Jimmy, do you have any final questions that you want to ask before we wrap up?
Actually, if you have just a moment, I really wanted to share something with you, because I don't know if I'll ever get another chance to. So,
well, where are you? What state?
I live in the Poconos in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. I know the Poconos. I'm in Virginia.
Oh, nice. Your weather's a little warmer than us, but we finally are hitting a little bit of spring here, so it's nice.
Yeah.
Unlike Ron, you're going into autumn now, aren't you?
Still very hot here.
But I wanted to, if you didn't mind, I wanted to share with you just how I found your book, because on its own, it was probably one of the more miraculous things that ever happened to me. Like I said earlier, your book had changed my life. But what happened was, as many of the people who are watching know, I was in the occults in my youth. I was into witchcraft, and God had rescued me and saved me from it. But he didn't just suddenly appear and say, you need to go this way. He kind of left me adrift for years. Like 3 years, I went adrift from church to church. I was looking. I didn't know where to go. The only thing I knew was every one of my friends said you could go anywhere but that Catholic church down the road. They wouldn't touch it with a 30-foot pole. They insisted the people in there worshipped the Virgin Mary and saints, and they're idolaters, they're evil. So that was the only one I wouldn't go to. But I was so trapped in my past still, just like how we were talking when after the warning people revert back. I was still finding myself constantly going back. I was interested in Nostradamus still and psychic powers. I wasn't getting involved like I was at one time in witchcraft, but I kept finding myself still wandering back to, where I shouldn't have been. And finally, I just screamed out one night. I was like, I'm trying to learn about this guy named Jesus. And I was like, I can't love someone I don't know. I can't love this man because I didn't have a real fatherly role model at the time. My parents were divorced. I didn't live with my dad, so I didn't have much of a relationship at the time with him. So I didn't know how to relate to Jesus. And I didn't know what to do about it. I was lost. And suddenly an inspiration hit me that night to call my grandmom. And so I called her. I said, out of the blue, the thought suddenly appeared to me that she was religious. And I called and asked her, I said, did the Virgin Mary ever give a prophecy? And she said her jaw dropped because she knew I was from the occults and she couldn't believe I was asking. She's like, Jim, I have been praying for you for 3 or 4 years now and didn't know you would ever come around to this. And she told me, she's like, years ago, I had sent to your house this blue book called The Thunder of Justice. And as she was saying it, it suddenly dawned on me in my mind. Years ago, she had sent my stepfather at the time your book. And he got in mail, looked at it, and he threw it in the trash. I was a pack rat. If it was of any type of value or shined, I was like a monkey on shiny things. I would grab it, I'd throw it in a box, and it would go in my attic. And I did that with everything at that time. And she was saying this, and it dawned on me. I was like, I know exactly where that book is. As soon as I got off the phone with her, I ran up into the attic. It felt like someone had picked me up and lifted me into the attic. I don't remember running up it, And as soon as I got up in the attic, the entire attic, as far down as you can see, was black, except for this one beam of light shining down on this one box in the back. Ran right to it, opened it up, and your book is sitting right there on the top in the light. It was like, oh! I grabbed it and I glided down the steps. Again, I don't remember how I even got down those steps, but because it was so fast, I flew down, and next thing I know, I started pouring through your books. Sorry. I started pouring through your book. And as I was reading it, I sat in my bed, and I stayed up for 2 nights straight reading nonstop. And every time I turned a page, it was like I was hearing this voice. I couldn't discern it because I wasn't hearing it with my ear, but yet I was still hearing it saying, this is true. Keep reading. Keep listening. This is real. And in that book, I was suddenly almost like, it wasn't like an out-of-body like experience, but it was more like I was seeing myself in those pages. I was seeing all the sins that, was displeasing to heaven. And I'm like, I do that. I did that. I'm doing this. And I was seeing myself in those pages. And suddenly it dawned on me one key thing that was throughout the whole book. Every time you mentioned the Blessed Mother, she wasn't trying to get glory for herself. She wasn't like, hey, I'm here. Come over to Garabandal. She never did that. She was always pointing to her son.
That's right.
Yeah, that's all she would do. Point to her son. She's like, it's not about me. It's about him. If you're not going to listen to him, I will tell you, go this way. She always said the same thing. Go to her son. Go to her son in the Eucharist. Go to confession. Pray for the Pope. And it dawned on me that all of these attributes that she keeps telling everyone to do and everyone to go to, there was only one place that was at, and it was at the one place I was told never to go to. And from that night, it took 2 nights to read from beginning to end. I was so exhausted. I literally just crashed and slept the entire next day. I was so tired. But that day had changed the entire course of my life. Everything that is going on here, from the website to everything you see behind me, none of it would be here if it wasn't for what you had done. So,
well, that is very, very nice to hear. It just warms my heart, actually, that there is some fruit. I mean, we've had a lot of nice letters over the years, and in that I got more into the revised edition in 2010, and I got more into the political philosophy of what the New World Order was doing, where I even gave the speech of what Kennedy said about secret societies in the book. But in the 1993 edition, the word "I" never appears in the book. My wife and I, we didn't put out, we let her speak. Those are all her words. And that's who she changes hearts, not us. She changes them.
Well,
So, Ted, can you remind our audience about what books, the name of your books, and where they can find them? And sorry for interrupting you there.
Well, so you're in Australia, but everything is available on Amazon. But for those in the United States, they can go to sign.org. And our magazine is Signs and Wonders for Our Time. But, everything is in ebook as well as hard copy on Amazon, which is going to be a whole lot cheaper to get in Australia or wherever you're at, anywhere in that part of the world. All of my books are up there.
And can you please list the name of your book? So the one that we're talking about is The Thunder of Justice, but you've got several other books.
The one that Ron is talking about is called The Thunder of Justice, which is in actually 7 languages. It's the subtitle is The Warning, the Miracle of Chastisement in the Era of Peace. But then after that, I've done a couple of films, but I did a book on the political philosophy of the New World Order called Hope of the Wicked, the Master Plan to Rule the World. And I got into a lot of the things with population control and basically I called it, it was before the word deep state was used. I released it in 2000. It's got 1,200 footnotes of phrases and things that the world leaders themselves, where they said they wanted to bring the world, from the leading politicians and statesmen of the world to the bankers to the NGOs, to literally. So that's what we're fighting. We're literally fighting Satan's cohort, and we, as apostles of the last times, are on the side of what heaven is trying to. We're helping the Blessed Mother crush the head of the serpent.
Any chance that you're going to do them in Audible?
I've never done any of my books in Audible.
Because I'm sure a lot of people like me, our eyes aren't as good anymore, and it's hard for me to read a book. I can barely read my emails anymore, so I listen to Audible. So if you ever consider it, I would love that.
Yeah, people have asked, and I just don't know. I've heard that Audibles are getting bigger with the older crowd, just because so many people are commuting and everything else as well. In cars, they listen to them. My son listens to a lot of books on audio.
Oh yeah, I mean, I have The Warning by Christina Watkins. I have that as an Audible book, and I've listened to it like 50 times already. And every time I listen to it, I learn something new I didn't realize. Love it.
Yeah.
So
well, thank you so much, Ted and Jim, for coming. And Jim, would you like to give us a bit of an update on your website and where people can find you, Jimmy?
Well, as you saw, if I couldn't imagine anyone not knowing the website yet, but if you don't, it is afterthewarning.com. On there, we had just added Luisa Picaretta's messages on there, one every day, and every day it'll change to the next one. So that way, if you go there every day, you could read a new one and continue learning. It's going to take over 6 years to get through the list. I also now on there, whenever a podcast is coming up, or if it's already played, it's now on there as well, and you could go back to it, listen to it, or you could see it coming up in the future. So that's afterthewarning.com.
And I encourage everyone to go and support both Jimmy's website and Ted's apostolate as well. And Ted's website's on signs.org.
SIGN. SIGN.org. Singular.
Any final words to wrap up, or a final prayer for us, Ted, before we say goodbye?
I would just say, live the faith, stick to what we know is true. And it's time now, due to the confusion and the chaos and the mayhem in the world, let a lot of that slide, but stick to what absolutely we're asked to do. Mass being the center of our life, daily rosary, confession, and just the rubrics of the faith. And if we do that, we're going to have the discernment going forward, because why? The safety is in the Immaculate Heart.
Amen. And can you finish off our podcast today with a prayer, please?
Me?
Yes, please, Ted.
Oh, okay. Father in heaven, we ask you to be with each of our listeners and all of our families. We ask that you put a protective hedge around all of our families in these perilous times. Be with all of us. Give us the discernment. Give us the preternatural gifts, infuse knowledge and other things that we're able to minister those around us. Have us be your person in these times, and give us all of the graces that are necessary to sustain us in the times ahead. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, amen.